Welcome to the Ego versus EQ and You podcast, where we discuss the key aspects of emotional intelligence and ways to apply it in everyday living. Now let's work together to make common sense more common. Hi, welcome back to the Ego versus EQ and You podcast. I'm Jen Shirkani. Today we're going to talk about being blind to your downstream impact. And this one is interesting because I think it consolidates a couple of these traps almost into one, where the ripple effect of our behavior on others is what we're looking at. And I was a sort of co-conspirator, I guess you could say, in this ego trap at one point in my career. I was working for a large corporation in their internal learning and development group. And one of the things that the CEO did, who was younger, it was a family business. So he was made CEO pretty young, younger than a typical CEO for a company that size. But he was really into talent management and training and developing leaders. So he really was close to my group. And I was new to the organization, and he had a habit of meeting with the new people at a lunch. So he'd host lunch for the 5 or 6 newbies at the company that month. And I was in one of those lunches and we were chatting, and he was just so interested in kind of my history, my background. And I was nervous going into the meeting, being who he was, but he totally put me at ease. And, we were talking about leadership and women in leadership in particular. And this was decades ago. So there were even fewer women in senior leadership roles at that time. And, they had a distribution center out of state. There were several out of state, but one particular had a female distribution center manager, only one of 3 that they had across dozens of these. And I happened to be going to the town where this person worked up in the near future. And I had mentioned to him that I was going to attend a certification in that city. And he mentioned to me, oh, that is where this female leader works. And she is great. And I think it would be wonderful for you to meet with her while you're there. I think you should call her and tell her you'll be in town and, have a meeting. So here I go back to my office, right? Don't even think anything of it. I pick up the phone, I call her up, and I say, hey, the CEO suggested that I stop by and see you when I'm in town for this meeting I'm going to in a couple weeks. And I could tell she was a little caught off guard, like, what is the agenda here, and what are we doing? And again, it just, talk about no EQ. I missed it completely and didn't read it at all right. And so I hang up the phone, and that was like on a Friday. Saturday morning, I get a call from my boss at home, and she's saying, what did you do? You've set off such a firestorm. This distribution center manager is now calling everybody, asking why HR is coming to meet with her and what is all this about. And the president or CEO suggested it. So what, is she in trouble? What's going, and my boss had no idea I had done this. I didn't tell her. And her boss had no idea. And her boss had no idea. So I'm now 4 levels down, getting chewed out on a Saturday morning for being so stupid. And it was a very painful lesson that I learned, one, on sort of corporate politics. It was my first real big formal company that I worked for. And prior to that, I had been with more founder-led or smaller entrepreneurial style companies where that wouldn't have been such a big deal. But in a Fortune 500, it was a big deal. And I just fell into this. And I never saw her, first of all. I never ended up getting to see her on that trip. And I don't think the CEO ever even heard about what happened. He never followed up with me on it. He never asked me if I met with her. And so I didn't bring it up. And I don't even know if he knows the whole downside of that. So this is when good intentions go wrong, right? So a leader might shift priorities on a whim. Or they might have this, what we call the initiative du jour. They read an article in the Harvard Business Review magazine, they go to a conference, they hear some great idea, and then they want to implement it like ASAP. I've seen it happen where they'll assign what they deem simple tasks to someone, but have no concept of how actually difficult it might be to do. In our case, we level jumped, meaning he reached down into the organization and suggested something or asked for something without considering all those people in the middle and having them be informed or involved in it. These are all things that can happen that create these giant ripple effects around. And I've had leaders say, well, I tell them, don't worry about this. It's not a major priority. Don't reschedule your day around my request. But I mean, let's be real. If the C-level executive or your boss's boss asks you to do something, you're not going to put it on the bottom of your to-do list. So be aware when you ask for something, even when you say there's no hard deadline on this or the deadline is way out, people are just naturally going to want to drop everything to help. So it's something we all have to be aware of. And the other thing, I think, when we go back to that initiative du jour or the shifting of priorities, we found a study when I was writing the book, and it said that if you are diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, you are actually 300% more likely to start your own business. So we see a lot of founders with this impulsive nature. And when we look at impulse control in general, and that is one of the emotional intelligence skills, actually self-control, right? Responding, that comes from impulse control. Research shows that business owners actually have lower impulse control than average. And that actually is a good thing, because when you're small, you have to be nimble. You've got to move quick. You've got to take advantage of opportunities that might not last. So it doesn't mean it's a bad thing to have that impulsiveness, but we have to have that EQ around it to make sure that we are not creating havoc downstream from us. And I kind of also describe this, if you picture visually like a submarine. I call it like the submarine boss. So that person is floating along. Maybe they're out on travel. Maybe they're in their office a lot or in meetings. And then they surface out of nowhere and want to know what's going on and what's happening and get involved in stuff. And so it's really important that if you are a leader, you're recognizing when you're coming up for air and what boats are on the surface there that are going to get knocked out when you do that. And assign tasks with information downstream, so everyone in the chain is aware of what's going on, clear on deadline. Other things you can do to help avoid this is respect the process and or the structure. Sometimes I'll see leaders who have someone in their organization they know that maybe has worked there a really long time, back when they had different roles. And that's someone who you trust, someone who you know does things the way you want it done. You might have a report that you like the way they do that report for you, or they might be good at PowerPoint presentations. So you ask them to do that, even though it's not really their job anymore. And that is another dilemma that you're creating for those employees. So respect sort of the process and the structure of how tasks should be delegated throughout. And I don't want to add more bureaucracy to things, because I think it is good when organizations are flat enough that you can have multiple people doing things and casual conversations can occur. But again, a lot of this is about awareness of what's happening and what you're asking of others. And then I think we also have to realize we are role models. People are watching us all the time, and we're going to talk about a trap just on being watched. But this is something that we have to have responsibility for, I think, too. And so if you have a great idea, bring it to a team. Say, hey, I was at a conference. I just heard about this. What do you guys think? I heard of another business owner who had gone to a meeting back in the day when going green was really big and going paperless at the office. And one of the employees there told me that he came back Monday from the weekend conference and said, okay, we're going paperless tomorrow. And everyone was like, well, that's not really how this works. We can't just get rid of everything overnight. But it was just, that was it, mind made up. Some of this is also connected back to communication style. So if you haven't done a lot of work on communication style, I think this is a really helpful area to look at, and we'll probably do a whole podcast on communication style at some point, because there is a tendency as communicators for some of us to be somewhat impulsive, to take quick action. And so again, knowing if that is your communication style and your tendency, really reading the room, reading the environment, is this the right time? It might be a great idea, but the time is off. So being able to kind of check in with other people. What do you guys think of this idea? And if we did it, when would it make sense? Those are all really helpful ways to avoid this trap from taking over. So hopefully that was helpful to you in avoiding being blind to the downstream impact and giving you a little more self-awareness around the ripple effect of your behavior. Thanks for listening today. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us today on the Ego versus EQ and You podcast. If you liked this episode, be sure to follow us or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, and please share our show with others. For questions or future topic suggestions, please email us at podcast@jenshirkani.com. Until next time, keep using your EQ and show ego who's boss.